Hello everyone, John Maher here, and this is your weekly Grass10 update on the dairy edge. It has been a very, very unusual spring. Some heavy land farms have only just started grazing, and some of the drier farms are starting the second rotation. What a variation, but anyway, that's what has happened. I suppose from a growth perspective last week, it was very variable across the country, I would say, compared to previous weeks. Some counties grew well, like Carlow and Kilkenny, at over 30 kilograms of dry matter per hectare per day, and some like Clare grew less than 20 kilograms of dry matter per hectare per day. For the record, the average growth rate was in the low to mid 20s, I suppose. But the grass growth predictions this week are about 30 kilograms of dry matter per hectare per day, which is about average. Some will grow more than that. However, when you look at growing more and look at deeper dig into the data, it will tell us that the grass recovery is much higher than those kind of figures outlined earlier, provided though the fertiliser and slurry applications are up to date. From a weather perspective, the weather is very changeable. It's probably the best way of describing it. From a good day one day to bad days another day. And I suppose the predicted rainfall for the week is highest in the western seaboard, with well over an inch and sometimes close to an inch and a half. So it's tricky and remains so. Dry matters are running higher this week, I suppose, especially on the good days, ranging from 18% up to the low 20s. So I suppose variation is the order of the day, and it's a case of being able to deal with that. From a grass supply side, on average, it's well above target at 863 kilograms of dry matter per hectare, but that's a little bit misleading because some farms have lots of grass and won't get to graze at all. I suppose, especially those in heavy land. But 20% of farms have an average farm cover of less than 600, which is just too low, and only means probably for many of them grass per day. About 20% of farms then have an average cover over 1100, which is difficult to see getting all this graze, and some of it will be diverted for silage, I would imagine, depending on the weather now, of course, but that's where it is. So huge variation there. But it's a case of kind of heads up and seeing where you're at and working towards a target. So for the targets then, for those who farm on dry land, is when the first 3 to 4 paddocks are a cover of 11, 1200. Then you know that these are going to take off, and the second rotation should probably start. The average farm cover, though, just to be clear, it needs to be monitored very closely. Some of the better farms now will walk, I suppose 3 times in 2 weeks. But the average farm cover needs to be about 650 kilograms of dry matter per hectare or higher, especially where the stock rate is high. If you think about the numbers and you're stocked to 3 cows per hectare, and you want 200 per livestock unit, well, then the average farm cover is going to be, closer to 700. So I suppose that 180, 200 per livestock unit is, in terms of cover, is what we're really targeting at, really, to be honest. The farm would need to be up to date too, in terms of fertiliser slurry application, at about 60 units supplied per acre on dry farms by early April, to be honest, to sustain that level of cover. Later, heavier farms will be starting the second rotation a lot later, in April. And as I said, some have only started going out in the last week or so, and even only by day at times. So it depends a bit on the rainfall pieces, I suppose. I'm thinking places like, Kerry and West Clare, which are kind of struggling with rainfall, really, to be honest. The next application of fertiliser, though, should ideally be for the month of April for nearly all farms, if at all possible, a nitrogen P, K plus sulphur type product. That was fine for me to say this for the grazing ground. And that's for paddocks that haven't got slurry. Where slurry was applied, then it would be more like a nitrogen plus sulphur type product. I suppose it's important in both cases here to start the sulphur application. Slurry, by its nature, is low in sulphur. And if you want to get the best out of nitrogen use efficiency here, we need the sulphur to start being applied. It's fine for me to say a nitrogen plus P plus K plus sulphur product for ground that hasn't got slurry on the grazing area, if there's a P allowance there. If the fertiliser P allowance is low, some of this should be kept for reseeding, but the rest applied during April. The targets there really, from a P point of view, is to get it front loaded in the year. K is more of a second part of the year application. But if slurry's gone out, then that P application from fertiliser source is not required. But where there's no slurry gone out, whatever P allowance is there, once there is some sense for reseeding, should be applied to the grazing ground, especially low index ground. Okay, if that makes the most sense. little point applying peat to a high index ground when the allowances are tight. So, speaking of reseeding, then April, early May is the ideal time to go reseeding. I accept that the weather has been poor and that spraying has not really taken place, and in many cases has been delayed, and as a result, reseeding will be a bit delayed. But it's still a priority to be done. Most farmers are aware at this stage that the benefits of reseeding, anything from better response to fertiliser to growing more grass, they're all there, but they matter more than now than ever before, especially when fertiliser allowances are tighter than ever before. Their advantage of getting reseeds established in spring, it's much easier to get them up and running, and weed control is much easier compared to the autumn because the year tends to close in you, where in the spring the year generally works with you. I suppose on to our feature farmer for the week, Kieran Kennedy from Nenagh, Tipperary, has an average farm cover of 900 kilograms of dry matter per hectare. The first grazed paddocks has about 1,100 kilograms of dry matter per hectare, so we'll be starting the second round next week. Cows are going well now, and the diet is grass full-time and 3 kilograms of meal, doing 2.2 kilograms of milk solids. The fat and protein caught my eye here at 4.73 fat and 3.88 protein, which is phenomenal going. And I suppose earlier this week, 93% of the 200 cows were calved. In terms of slurry and fertiliser application, then, or the strategy for the farm, the slurry is going to the silage ground at 2,500 gallons to the acre. The milking platform will be up to about 60 units of nitrogen applied by this week, which it needs to be honest, to keep things moving. The overall targets really are for dry farms, about 80 to 85 units applied between fertiliser and slurry by the 1st of May, more like 60 units for heavier land. So that's the story this week. Grass is moving, but the weather is changeable. It requires monitoring, I suppose, in simple terms. There's a lot of planning to be done in terms of reseeding, silage ground, level of meal feeding, and by knowing the level of grass supply on the farm, these decisions are made much easier. So walking the farm is probably a key here now. We're into the part of the season now where grass starts to take off and needs careful monitoring. So if you'd like to hear more from the Grass10 team, subscribe to the weekly Grass10 newsletter, which is available on the Grass10 page on the Teagasc public website, and the link to this newsletter is also available in the description of this podcast. We'd like to thank those who support the Grass10 campaign: AIB, Grass and Agro, Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine, FBD and the Farmers Journal. This has been your Grass10 update, and we'll talk to you all next week. Best of luck in the week ahead.